From sticky tape on a desk to a thunderstorm in the sky, that's the transition we're making in Unit C.2, Lesson 6. My name is Dan Olandisi, and I'm a science educator who uses OpenSciEd in my classroom. And I'm here to make teaching this lesson a great experience for you and your students. It's an important moment in the unit, so I've put together a breakdown of key moments and classroom-tested tips to ensure your students successfully apply their particle models to the real world. So let's take a look at how we can make that connection clear by first looking at where we left off in Lesson 5, which is when students did the heavy lifting on a microscopic scale. They used the sticky tape and simulations to figure out that static interactions are caused by electrons moving between matter. The absolute non-negotiable takeaway here is that static equals electron transfer, which allows us to navigate our focus to answering the question, if we know moving electrons cause static, what in the world is causing them to move up in the sky before a lightning strike? Let's take a look at the overall structure of this lesson, which you'll see is listed as an investigation. But just a heads up, it's not a traditional lab. This is really a one-day deep dive into reading and sense making. That means your prep is low on materials, but high on strategy. It's all about getting ready to guide students through a complex text and making the most of those discussion moments. Because this is a one-day investigation, I treat the whole experience as one big sense-making loop. We start by critically reading the text, how lightning starts, and then explicitly compare the natural lightning system to the work we've been doing with sticky tape. Throughout that process, we figure out that static forces in clouds come from moving electrons, which requires contact between specific atmospheric ingredients. And specifically, we find that collisions between ice and water separate charges, creating massive electron buildup necessary for lightning. But the critical realization here is that lightning involves vastly larger scales of distance and charge than anything we can build in the classroom. That difference in scale leads us to wonder, how can we precisely predict the strength of those dangerous forces if the distance and charges are so much larger than we tested in the lab? For this lesson, I'm looking to have my students walk away with three big takeaways. I start by confirming that we all agree on the mechanism inside the cloud, that it's the collisions between ice crystals and water molecules that cause charge separation, creating a negative base and a positive top. From there, I really emphasize the difference in scale. I want students to walk away understanding that while physics is similar to our sticky tape, lightning involves a massive buildup of electrons over distances that are vastly larger than our classroom systems. Finally, we land on our formal definition of electricity as the movement of charges, specifically those electrons moving from the cloud to the ground that produce the strike. So let's zoom in on some specific key moments of the lesson. There are three specific points in this lesson where the cognitive load is highest and most critical for students in order to build our overall understanding of electricity and lightning. And one of my first key moments comes right at the start of part 2 with the turn and talk. I treat this as a quick diagnostic check, asking them what causes those forces, and then I walk the room to see exactly where their heads are and the conversations are taking them. I'm specifically listening for a consensus that static is caused by the physical movement of electrons between matter. I found a common sticky point here is that students focus on just the friction or the rubbing, and if I hear that, I pause to clarify that friction is just the action, but the electron transfer is the actual cause. I find that anchoring them in a particle model now is helpful because it unlocks the next part. It ensures that when they see a thundercloud diagram in part 5, they don't just see a weather map, they see a massive chemistry model of charge separation. And this brings us to that important visual that's in part 5 of the thundercloud diagram. When I have this up on the board, I focus on helping students decode the messiness of the data. I specifically point out the arrows representing the wind speed and the updrafts. I need students to figure out that heavy negative particles are sinking to the bottom while lighter positive ice crystals are being pushed to the top. My critical check here is asking them to locate the collisions. If they can identify that ice hitting water is what separates the charge, I know they've successfully transferred the rubbing tape simulation concept to the atmosphere. In part 6, we start comparing scales using a similarities and differences chart. And on the similarities side, I'm looking for them to anchor the mechanism, confirming that contact between matter, charge separation, and the resulting static forces are happening in both systems. But the differences side is where I have the class confront scale. I guide them to explicitly note that the distance and the amount of charge are vastly larger in the storm, in fact, thousands of times larger. Capturing this on that chart creates the essential gap in their understanding. It highlights that our qualitative model isn't quite enough anymore, which perfectly justifies why we need the math, specifically Coulomb's law, in lesson 7. We wrap up by navigating out. We know how static charge builds up in a thundercloud, but the scale is huge. We leave them wondering, how can the same force that barely bends water in our classroom manage to jump miles of empty space in the sky? We need a way to investigate that relationship between force, distance, and charge quantitatively. And so for this lesson, let's take a look at some material management and tips and tricks to help you and your students in the classroom. And so I know from experience that discussions can sometimes hit a wall of silence. To keep the silence productive rather than awkward, I lean heavily on two things. First, I keep that matter, energy, and forces poster front and center. I don't just leave it on the wall, I have students actively looking at it. When I notice that a group is getting stuck, I prompt my discussion facilitators to use the poster category to drive the thinking forward. I encourage them to ask things like, okay, look at the matter column. What changes are we seeing in those particles? Or look at the force column. What is pushing or pulling here? I find that using the poster as a third point in the conversation takes the pressure off students to simply know the answer and shifts the focus to using the lens of the cross-cutting concepts. Since this is a heavy reading day, I find that by taking on a more active facilitation role, students' engagement seems to go up. This text is complex, so let's use every tool we have to make it accessible, which starts by giving students a selection of active reading strategies, such as annotation and highlighting. I also see a lot of value in having students complete these summary boxes after each section of the reading and have students read what they wrote out loud to the class in order to help build confidence as well as a way to informally assess their understanding of the reading. If you have a class with a wide range of reading and or language abilities, don't be afraid to leverage tech. You can copy the text into AI or use built-in Google Doc tools to adjust the Lexile level or provide translations for students who need that support. You can also consider reading the article out loud to the class while they engage with their active reading strategy. Hearing the words read correctly helps them navigate the jargon without getting stuck on giving up because they can't pronounce or make sense of a single technical word. Remember, our goal here isn't to test their reading stamina. It's to help them process the text so they can find evidence they need to help build their models. Our one key addition to the personal glossary is the word electricity. With that word, I tried to just not give them the definition, but instead make them earn that as a class and individuals. I have them try to define that concept based on what they figured out about lightning and their own personal experience with electricity before I reveal that final glossary definition. If I'm speaking honestly, this is not something that I do as consistently enough as I would like in my own classroom because it does take quite a bit of time. So I am trying to speak it into existence in this video, and I hope that it's something that we can all commit to trying to increase our instructional practice with and make students think about these definitions before providing it to them. So let's take a moment to keep track of the tools we're using and developing in this lesson. We started by leaning on some of our old friends, the driving question board and the matter and energy forces poster, to anchor the lesson and help our students engage in some active discussions. But honestly, the real MVP is that T-chart where we compare the differences and similarities from our investigations in the classroom to better understanding the lightning system. It's going to be our bridge. It captures that crucial scale problem, which is that huge differences in distance and charge that we need to justify the math that we're developing in lesson 7. So I make sure to keep that one safe and visible for tomorrow. And finally, we get to update our MEF poster with the new thundercloud model that we just figured out. And that brings us to lesson 7. Now that we've seen the massive scale of lightning, we are ready to get quantitative. Next time, we break out the digital scales and Coulomb's law to figure out exactly how much distance affects force. Thank you for taking time to learn more about lesson 6, and I hope you have a great experience in your classroom.